7 this morning, so stick with us for that one. Now, it is a big day, Tuesday, the 4th of January, by the way, big day for Prince Andrew today. His lawyers will meet Virginia Giuffre's lawyers in court a bit later in the US to work out whether the civil lawsuit against the Duke of York should continue. Virginia Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew over claims that she was forced to have sex with him at the homes of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein when she was 17. The Duke firmly denies the allegations. Spoke earlier to Josie Cox, a journalist in New York who's been following the case.
Later today, the US District Judge Lewis Kaplan is due to hear oral arguments on whether to dismiss a civil lawsuit that Virginia Giuffre filed against Prince Andrew, accusing him of sexual abuse. Giuffre filed the suit, which seeks unspecified damages here in a Manhattan court last summer in August 2021. And she alleges that he sexually abused her in Jeffrey Epstein's mansions in Manhattan and in other locations too when she was 17 years old, which was about 20 years ago. And Prince Andrew, for his part, has categorically denied all those claims, most famously, of course, in a 2019 Newsnight interview in which he said that he actually had no recollection of ever having even met her. And his lawyers have accused her of trying to profit from the accusations made against Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, took his own life in a prison in 2019 and with whom Prince Andrew, was acquainted.
Right. So this whole thing rests on the decision that's made later today. Is that it pretty much, that the judges will decide if this can go ahead?
Yes, and there are two really important things to know here. The first one is that late last month, a lawyer for Prince Andrew, a man named Andrew Brettler, in a filing with the court, called for the case to be either halted or thrown out completely on the basis that Virginia Giuffre had lived in Australia for most of the time since the alleged crimes are said to have taken place, and that she does not have the necessary proof that she actually resided in Colorado here in America, which is what she stated in her original complaint. Brettler claimed that because of this, the court actually lacks the necessary jurisdiction over the proceedings. So that's one thing. And the second really important piece in this puzzle is a 2009 confidential settlement agreement between Jeffrey Epstein and Virginia Giuffre. And Giuffre had, you might recall, also accused Epstein of sexual abuse. And that agreement that they made was made public yesterday, on Monday this week, as part of the civil suit against Prince Andrew. And what the agreement said was that Epstein had paid Giuffre $500,000, $500,000, in return for agreeing to, quote, release, acquit, satisfy, and forever discharge Epstein, as well as any other person or entity who could have been included as a potential defendant. So Prince Andrew's lawyers are expected to point to this as evidence that the case should be thrown out. So it's now up to Judge Kaplan to decide whether the terms of this particular deal mean that Andrew is protected from Giuffre's lawsuit or not.
If the judge decides the case can go ahead, what then?
That's a great question. So if the case does go ahead, if the motion to dismiss it is not granted and no other motions to dismiss the case are granted, then yes, it to go to trial. People are saying sometime between September and December of this year is likely. But as you can hear from all of this, there are still a handful of unanswered questions. And as is clear, it's not only an extremely high profile case, but also a really, really legally and technically complex one.
And if it goes to trial, would Prince Andrew be legally obliged to take the stand?
He can be called to give oral evidence, as far as I know, but he cannot be compelled to do so. So ultimately, he can choose his level of defense in consultation with his legal team, and he can choose whether he will comply with court orders or not. So again, that is one of the pieces of information that is unclear at this stage.
And it's worth saying that this case is completely separate to the criminal case against Ghislaine Maxwell. But would the outcome of that case in any way influence the outcome of this one?
Yes, it's really, really important to understand, as you say, that the Maxwell trial, her verdict, that conviction applied only to her as an individual and what she did, and that none of that theoretically pertains to Prince Andrew in any way. What we should say, though, is that Virginia Giuffre has been one of the most prominent accusers of both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell over the years. She was, for example, featured prominently in a documentary about Epstein's life that aired last year. So it's difficult to assess exactly what impact the verdict from last week will have on proceedings this week. What we can say is that if Ghislaine Maxwell had been acquitted, for example, that might have undermined some of Giuffre's accusations against Prince Andrew. As we know, though, Maxwell was found guilty on 5 of the 6 counts against her, including that really extremely serious charge of sex trafficking of a minor.
And clearly there's a lot of interest in this case back in the UK. What about in New York?
Yes, there's a huge amount of interest over here as well. There's an interest in the British royal family, as we know, and also just because it comes so soon after that Ghislaine Maxwell verdict that was covered so widely and that was really viewed here as a really, really integral piece in the sort of broader Me Too movement, and any, the resolution and the development of that movement as it goes forward.
That was Josie Cox, who is based in New York, journalist based in New York, following the case very closely. Now, I should say, in a statement released by Buckingham Palace last year, the Duke said he was appalled by the sex abuse claims surrounding his former friend, Jeffrey Epstein. He says, or the statement said, His Royal Highness deplores the exploitation of any human being, and the suggestion he would condone, participate in, or encourage any such behaviour is abhorrent. Now, in terms of a decision in that legal case, we think it'll happen later on today in America, obviously, so it could be this afternoon, this evening, but as soon as we get word of that here on 5 Live, we will bring it to you. 6:48.